My dear students, now we are going to discuss the next chapter of first flight, that is the sermon at Benares. In the figure you can see the figure of Lord Buddha who is preaching his 5 disciples. When we focus on the title of this chapter, the sermon at Benares, sermon means religious preachings or religious talk. So, in this chapter, we will see the impact of Lord Buddha's preachings on common people. In other words, we can say what is the impact of sermon of Lord Buddha on common people. We will see. The whole chapter revolves around Lord Buddha when he took birth. How did he leave his house, his palace? Later on, how did he become monk? Or why did he become monk? What is the purpose of becoming monk? We will see. We will find that he left his palace in search of truth. In order to get salvation, in order to get emancipation, he left his palace. So, in this chapter, we will see the life of Lord Buddha and his preachings. Now we proceed to the introduction of this chapter. See, the sermon at Benares throws light upon the early life of Lord Buddha, who was originally born as a prince in the royal family. As I told you that this chapter describes the life of Lord Buddha, who was a prince who had taken birth in the royal family, but he left his palace in order to get emancipation, in order to get salvation. He left his royal family. On being exposed to the sufferings of the world which he was earlier shielded from, he had been kept away from the sufferings of the world from his childhood. But the moment when he had seen the sufferings of the people of the world, then he became sad. Then he decided to search the reason of sufferings. He left his princehood and went in search of salvation, thus leaving all the worldly pleasures behind. So here we come to know the reason why did Lord Buddha leave his royal family. Why did he leave worldly pleasures behind him? Only to get salvation, only to get emancipation. In search of salvation, he left his worldly pleasures, he left his princehood, he left his royal family. Upon attaining spiritual awakening, he gave his first sermon in the city of Benares, hereby making a lady named Kisa Gautami realize that men are mortal and a wise person should not grieve at what is bound to happen, for it only enhances pain and suffering. So, after attaining a spiritual awakening, he gave his first sermon in the city of Benares. He made Kisa Gautami realize that men are mortal. A wise person should not grieve at a person who is wise, a person who is scholar, a person who is awakened, a person whose senses are awakened. They do not become sorrowful at the death of a particular person. Why? Because men are mortal. The person who has taken birth, he has to die. That is the ultimate truth. For that, a person should not show his grief. That is accepted by us. That is the reality we should accept. So those who are wise, they will not weep at the death of a particular person. When we become sad, then it will enhance our pain and sufferings. So this is the sermon. This is the lesson taught by Lord Buddha to Kisa Gautami. He made Kisa Gautami realize that men are mortal. You should not weep at the death of a particular person, because death is eternal. Death is truth. If we weep at the death of a particular person, then it will only enhances our pain and sufferings. So that is the outline of this chapter, the sermon at Benares. In this chapter, we will notice the early childhood of Lord Buddha, and after attaining spiritual knowledge, how did he make Kisa Gautami realize that men are mortal. We should not weep at the death of a person, because it is certain. Death is certain. Now we proceed to first paragraph of this chapter, that is the sermon at Benares. See, Gautam Buddha 563 BC 483 BC. Gautam Buddha began life as a prince named Siddhartha Gautam. That is the real name of Mahatma Buddha, Lord Buddha, Siddhartha Gautam. He was a prince in northern India. At 12, he was sent away for schooling. In the Hindu, sacred you see, embodying the laws or doctrines of religion, that is sacred, scriptures. And 4 years later, he returned home to marry a princess. Scriptures, you can understand, that is the sacred, pious writings of religion, that is scriptures. Pious, sacred writing of religion, that is scripture. So at 12, he was sent for the schooling, and he learnt scriptures. He learnt sacred laws. He learned doctrines of religion. principles of religion. After 4 years, he returned home to marry a princess. They had a son and lived for 10 years as befitted royalty. Befitted here means suit. They had a son. Lord Buddha and princess had a son, lived for 10 years as befitted royalty. At about the age of 25, the prince, here therefore, shielded from the sufferings. Prince had been kept away from the sufferings of the world, but at the age of 25, who had been kept away from the sufferings of the world while out hunting, chanced upon a sick man, then an aged man, then a funeral procession. So, at the age of 25, Prince went outside of his palace. Why did he go out for hunting? He went out for the hunting. In the meantime, he got a chance to see a sick man, then an aged man, and finally funeral procession. Simple meaning is this: at the age of 25, Prince left his palace for hunting. When he was going for hunting, in the meantime, he saw a sick man, an aged man, and a funeral procession. So these three things were seen by Gautam Buddha, and finally a monk begging for alms. Alms here means money or food given to poor people. That is called alms, ALMS. Food or money that is given to the poor people. So these are the sights, SIGHTS, seen by Gautam Buddha. He saw a sick man, aged man, funeral procession, and a monk who was begging. These sights so moved him that he at once went out into the world to seek enlightenment. Enlightenment means a state of high spiritual knowledge. So after seeing these sights, he decided to get spiritual knowledge, not ordinary spiritual knowledge, a state of high spiritual knowledge concerning the sorrows he had witnessed. So in para number 1, we have seen the early life of Gautam Buddha. We came across that Gautam Buddha was kept away from the sufferings of the world, but at the age of 25, he went out for hunting. In the meantime, he saw a sick man, aged man, funeral procession, and a monk who was begging for alms. These sights had deep impact on Lord Buddha. After that, he decided to attain a state of high spiritual knowledge. He decided to get it, attain it at any cost. So this is para number 1. Now we proceed to para number 2. So in para number 1, we have seen that Lord Buddha had made his mind to leave his palace because The sights had deep impact on him. Due to that, he had decided to leave the palace, leave his wife, leave his child in order to get salvation. He left worldly pleasures, he left his royal family in search of salvation. He wandered for 7 years. Wandered means if a person moves without any purpose, that is called wandering. If a person moves without any purpose, then it is called wandering. So Lord Buddha wandered here and there for 7 years and finally sat down under a peepal tree. He sat down under a peepal tree where he vowed. Vowed here means solemnly promised to do a specific thing. He vowed to stay until enlightenment came. So after wandering here and there for 7 years, Lord Buddha decided to sit under a peepal tree. He decided to remain under a peepal tree until enlightenment came to him. He decided to remain under a peepal tree until he got enlightenment there. Enlightened after 7 days, he renamed tree the Bodhi tree. Bodhi tree means tree of wisdom. He renamed the tree because he sat under the peepal tree. There he got enlightenment. That's why he gave the tree name Bodhi tree. The meaning of Bodhi tree is tree of wisdom, and began to teach and to share his new understandings. So what he had experienced, what he had understood after getting enlightenment, he spread it everywhere. He spread his understandings among people. He shared his understandings among people. At that point, he became known as the Buddha. Means when he started preaching, when he started delivering his sermon, when he started describing his understandings, at that time he was known as the Buddha. What is the meaning of the Buddha? The awakened or the enlightened. That is the meaning of Buddha. Buddha means awakened or the enlightened. So simple meaning is this: for 7 years he wandered here and there. After that he decided to sit under a peepal tree, and he decided to remain under this tree until he got enlightenment. After 7 days, what happened? He got enlightenment. Then he gave that tree a name, that is Bodhi tree, means tree of wisdom. From there he started preaching what he had experienced, what he had understood. Everything had been shared by him. After that he was known as a Buddha, means enlightened, awakened. The Buddha preached his first sermon at the city of Benares, most holy of the dipping places on the river Ganges. Holy, you understand, pious, sacred, dipping place, that is bathing. So that sermon has been preserved because he had given his first sermon, religious talk, at the city of Benares. That is the most holy place That sermon has been preserved and is given here. It reflects the Buddha's wisdom about one inscrutable kind of suffering. Inscrutable means something which cannot be understood. One inscrutable kind of suffering. The suffering that cannot be understood. That is reflected there. He gave his sermon. He gave his first sermon at Benares. And that sermon has been preserved and given here. This sermon reflects Buddha's wisdom about one unscrutable kind of suffering. Okay, so in the present paragraph, we have seen that how Lord Buddha got enlightenment. How did he get emancipation? After that, he started preaching. He started preaching his sermons, and first sermon was given at Benares, and his sermon was preserved, and this sermon reflects Buddha's wisdom about suffering that cannot be understood. That is about the death. Death is eternal. Death is painful. Death cannot be understood by anyone. What kind of pain is given by death that cannot be understood? But he had understood it. He had realized it. And he had given his sermon. One sermon on inscrutable kind of suffering. So that is all about this part. Thank you.